I'd like to tell you a story. 8 years ago, I admitted my friend's daughter, Emily, to my ICU for a lung and liver transplant. I recused myself from care and went home for the night. I came back one morning to find that Emily's heart had stopped and rushed into the room to help with chest compressions. 45 minutes later, I had to go out of the room and tell my friend his daughter died of septic shock. I hung up the doctor spurs and went home and started a company to address this problem. I am Sarma Valamuri. I'm an internist, and I'm the CEO, co-founder of Luminare. Emily's story is not unique. 1 in 3 people who die in a hospital today die of sepsis. It's the #1 cause of death in a hospital, and it is the leading cause of expense in Medicare. You probably already knew all this, but let me share some updates on what's happened in the market. We're going to have to do something about this problem because now Medicare has come out with new financial penalties, and I am famous for saying, I love Medicare. We now have mandatory reportable KPIs for sepsis, and this has probably been discussed in every executive boardroom today. And ultimately, purchasing decisions are being made off of 3 things. Do you fix the KPI? Can you show a financial return? And it's got to have AI. But does it got to have AI? Let's talk about why it needs AI. Well, firstly, there's this problem which I call the geography problem. What I'm showing you is a map of sepsis deaths across the country. The darker colors have higher sepsis death rates than the lighter colors. If you built an AI solution in a place with a dark color and then tried to deploy it somewhere else, it would not work. It breaks immediately. That's called a model fit problem. We also have race and ethnicity survival differences. I'm Asian, so I'm less likely to die of sepsis. And a lot of this has to do with access to care, with respect to where they live, with respect to other factors like their genetics and what else is going on behind the scenes. So let's just spend a moment on that. Sepsis has greater genetic risk of death than any other disease, including cardiovascular disease that is at scale. There's new receptors that are being used for drug treatments, and there's going to be new tests that come out to detect sepsis. Well, what are we going to do with all of these? Well, you see, the market's answer to this is 2 things. When you think sepsis, you have to think workflow. That's the vertical axis, and you got to think AI capabilities to address all the problems I just talked about. So we have those who are really good in the workflow, the Epics and the Sonners and the Meditech of the world, and they're great at workflow. They're really, really good at helping people at bedside. Then you have network monitoring systems that are passively monitoring patients, power virtual nursing, really good at what they do. And then you have point solutions that build AI alarms to detect AI or not, to detect sepsis or not. But the problem with sepsis is it's not just a detection problem, it's a classification problem. And so we built a system that addresses both the workflow and has high AI-based classification capabilities for sepsis. Because sepsis is no longer just sepsis, severe sepsis, septic shock. We phenotype patients. This was not previously possible till Mayo Clinic platform made this data available to us. We participated in the Accelerate program, applied our expert system to the data, and out came the sepsis phenotypes. Now, because we know what a patient's sepsis case looks like, you're now able to better understand what sepsis looks like for the individual as opposed to a population-based approach. You're now better able to understand their expected length of stay. You can understand their expected mortality. And finally, the holy grail is find the optimal treatment for this patient at your hospital. So to do all of this, Luminare had to build an ensemble of systems that work with each other, which talk to each other and do not just generate a sepsis alert, because that doesn't work and that's been proved in the market already. Instead, we educate the nurse and the provider at bedside to best understand what that patient is going through at any given moment. This helps us move the curve to the left. We've already proved that the workflow decreases mortality, decreases length of stay, and decreases people going to an ICU. So what? Well, this resulted in revenue to our customer, the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, and this is a study which was done by an independent third party that showed $11.2 million in the first 5 months of implementation. Now, We also decreased Medicare fallouts in more than half. And finally, our goal is of the 900,000 plus beds per day in the United States, in 2030, we want to capture 5% of that market. Now, this is going to take a lot of hand-holding, and I used to be the chief chef, the head bottle washer, and the maitre d', and so we hired a couple of folks. Paul's in the audience here today, and Jaime, who lives out on the West Coast, have begun taking our existing pipeline and converting these into early partners that can continue to leverage our solution. And finally, we signed a couple of distribution partnerships and very excited to be able to work with the Mayo Clinic platform program to be able to present to you our solution as a part of the ecosystem that they have created. Finally, we've been talking about sepsis all day, but there are other problems that are very much close to our heart that we want to address. Our ask, therefore, is two things. One is if you're a health system and you're here and you want to move the needle on your KPIs for Medicare value-based purchasing, if you feel like you need more ICU beds and you'd like to decrease ICU length of stay by a whole lot, and if you want to decrease your overall costs, if any of those three things speak to you, please give us a call. Secondly, if you're an investor, we're currently raising in order to convert our existing pipeline, which will get us to profitability and set the stage for growth next year. Finally, I'd like to end with this. We're here heralding the end of the #1 cause of death in the hospital, which we call sepsis. Mayo Clinic platform has established this immense ecosystem that now allows you to do that. And all I'm doing is asking you to join the revolution. I am Sarma, and I'm the CEO of Luminare. Thank you.